Hi there, and welcome to the Risk Matrix Live. This is very exciting. We have a wonderful show for you guys today. My name is Paula, and I get to work with the best hosts in the world on the best podcast in the world, the Risk Matrix. You can always find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and on veriforce.com. And please try to stay on mute and your camera is closed. Drop your questions right here into the chat. We will get to them all. And with that, I'm tossing it over to our hosts.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and my co-host, James Junkin. Today, we have a wonderful guest, Dr. David Daniels, close friend of mine, former student in his dissertation work, which we'll talk about a little bit because it led to what we're going to talk about today. David Daniels has a new book out, and welcome so much, James.
Absolutely. Welcome, Dr. Daniels. And I got this book on Friday. I devoured this book. And I wanted to start off with just a couple of passages that really meant the world to me and in educating me in this book. And so just a couple of excerpts from your book here. So while my fire service upbringing did an exceptional job preparing me for the fire suppression activities, it did little to prepare me for the emotions associated with my career. We didn't talk about these situations in the early 1980s, and everyone handled them differently, many by drinking alcohol, which I wasn't into. Not that the calls for service could have been prevented, but I wonder what it would have been like if we were trained to understand not only the physical hazards we would be exposed to, but also the non-physical ones. And just another excerpt, the most challenging and potentially harmful psychosocial hazards come from factors associated with other human beings in and around the organization. These hazards are the height of ambivalence in that they are both safe and harmful depending on the person's perception. Again, just a reading from Dr. Daniels' newest book, Psychosocial Hazards Are Real, a guide to understanding non-physical safety hazards. Welcome, Dr. Daniels, to the Risk Matrix.
Well, thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you, James. Thank you, Veriforce, for the opportunity, and particularly with you two. This is really special for me to talk to the two of you because you both have a little bit of a contribution to this thing happening. And I appreciate when you said my first book. I'm not sure if I'll ever do this ever again. I will say this was much easier to write than writing a dissertation. But it was really just something I felt like I wanted to get out. And now that it's out there, I just wanted to kind of see what happens. So I'm now seeing what happens.
Yeah. Well, David, I remember way back when you came to me with the idea for your dissertation, which is kind of what your book is. It's not born out of it, but it's part of your work in your dissertation. And I think, at least as far as I remember, you said that nobody really wanted to hear about what you wanted to research, right?
Right.
And when you and I got together, I said, you research whatever you want to research, and that was kind of where this kind of started. I think the passion for it, as James said in some of your excerpts, came way beforehand in the 80s, 90s, in the workplace, etc. But I do agree with what James said before we got on the air. Is a lot of this is groundbreaking. So I'm super proud of you for this journey. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey? Not in my words, but in your words.
Well, Doc, so interestingly, one of the stories I tell in the book is about my last fire chief's job. And the way that the organization was able to recruit me, I already had a job already, and they terminated their previous chief because he wouldn't tell them what was in the budget. So it's a public organization, and the elected people had no idea what their budget was because the guy who was in charge wouldn't tell them, which is a little odd to me. But so they got rid of him and his entire staff and hired me. But the way that they enticed me to take the job was, hey, we'll pay for your doctorate. That's because otherwise I wouldn't have done it. The place was smaller, I had to drive to get there, and there wasn't anything particularly driving me to go do this, but that really got me started. And so I jumped into that almost right away. I think I started there in January, started going to school in April. That strung along for about 3 or 4 years. Took my comp exams, got ready to start writing my dissertation, and silence. They couldn't find an advisor, a bunch of other stuff going on. So I actually experienced something that you talked about that you weren't into. You said you weren't into academic hazing. Well, I had experienced it already, so I knew what it was. And I can tell you that I say that about a lot of these experiences that I've had, they've now set me up that I just recognize it quicker and I respond to it quicker. And the first time somebody tells me that this is just the way we do it, so we're going to be like kind of aggressive to people, that's like, oh, okay, hold it, I'm out. Because I don't believe that we as human beings have to resort to almost are like these animalistic kinds of, tendencies of ours to just go beat up on people because we have power over them. And so really had, and I think I mentioned this, but mentioned you by name. I remember you saying your job was to help me be successful and get through this, not to beat me up in the process. And that's what made it more enjoyable. So I could go like, oh, but I got to tell you, I mean, there's still a part of me that, even while part of the reason why I was a little hesitant, will anybody listen to this? I'm used to people saying, that's a dumb idea. It's never going to work and that type. I'm kind of used to that. Now that I've gotten older, I care less about it, but I still hear it a lot. And I hear it not only sometimes in people's words, but in their actions. They'll say they're supportive and this is, you would not believe the hundreds of places who said, we don't want you, but we'll hire some other person not anywhere close to qualified as me, not anywhere close to my experience and background. And, I'd have to say, and in many cases, there's some similarities in the way that they look and act and talk, but they say it in their actions. And, James, again, based on the quotes that you brought up, it's really just based on perception. That's how it feels to me. So anyway, I will say that the opportunity to work with you and to dig into this idea about what a psychosocial hazard is really set the foundation for the book. And it seems to be going pretty well so far.
Yeah.
Well,
And you have a podcast too, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Kind of was born out of that.
Yeah. The podcast is Psych Health and Safety USA. Again, had both of you all on as guests, and Doc, you as one of my early guests, as a matter of fact. I think you were my first domestic guest, to be quite honest, as I think about it.
Possibly.
But,
You were desperate.
Well, again, another thing about this whole conversation is the places that feel safest to us are the environments where there's trust and where there's recognition. That's what always feels, and again, I'm not, when I talk about some of the things that people do that make it unsafe to other people, they do that because they don't think about the other person. They do it because it's safe for them. It works for me, so I keep doing it. I keep surrounding myself. So I start a business. I contract with people that I know, that I golf with, that I go to church with, that they're like me, and that feels comfortable. It really does. So I get it. I understand it. The issue I sometimes have with it is when people start complaining that their business isn't growing. Well, you've locked out people who might want to buy stuff from you because you don't consider that you don't consider it from their perspective, you consider it from yours. And
Right.
so I would rather that, and this is probably something I repeat more than I need to, but I would rather people just be honest and say, look, I want me and my 3 people. I don't want, there's me and my wife. I don't want anybody else to live in our house, period. Matter of fact, people come to visit us can stay for about a week. That's it. I'm just honest about that. We don't have pets, kids are gone, all that kind of stuff. We like it just the 2 of us. We're good with that. That's not to be angry at anybody. I mean, but that's just what we like. So we don't give people the illusion you can show up at our house and hang out for a few months. Like, no, just upfront with that.
Yep.
So let me ask you this, Dr. Daniels, I go to a lot of conferences. There are a lot of people speaking on this, and you've been recognized as perhaps, at least in the US, the authority when it comes to psychosocial hazards because of your groundbreaking research. But beyond just people saying psychosocial hazards, what does that mean? Because we have a lot of safety professionals that watch this. We understand physical hazards. We're trained about physical hazards, but we hadn't had a lot of training about psychosocial hazards.
Well, so most of the conversation I hear about this topic is kind of tangentially connected. People talk about psychological safety. So they run off with, Dr. Amy Edmondson's work and Dr. William Kahn. There's folks who've been talking about this really for years. As a matter of fact, her book, her research was actually back in the 90s, 1999, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
And people started picking up on it right around the pandemic. So it's been out for years. And, there were some circles who were really kind of into it and others, but when the pandemic hit, and people starting to focus on, the fact that, a lot of people have never gone back to the office because it wasn't safe there in the first place. It wasn't. And that's why they don't want to go back. On the other hand, you had folks who couldn't wait to get back because their home wasn't as safe as, they would like. So a lot of people are talking about psychological safety. People bring their whole selves, which is a spectacular concept. The challenge is, from a safety professional, we recognize what hazards are. And it's not just that the environment itself, the building looks safe, but the air's got particulate in it or the water's got a contaminant in it. And if you don't pay attention to that kind of thing, the house looked wonderful until they found out that there was radon under it, or mold or some other type of thing that they couldn't see. And so when I talk about a psychosocial hazard, and again, this is unique to my research because the international standard, I call them out ISO 45003, defines psychosocial risk, but does not define a psychosocial hazard. It gives a list of 88 of them, but it never really defines what they are. And that's what really sparked the book is, well, somebody ought to say what they are and why they are. So my definition, and again, this is also rooted in the research, a psychosocial hazard is a psychosocial factor that's perceived or experienced by the person exposed to it as threatening, such that it causes their behavior to change. And it's all of that stuff. It requires all of it. Sometimes the hazard's there, but I can deal with that. That's not really that big of a deal. Just like there's a certain amount of oxygen that we need in the air to breathe. Too much is bad. Not enough is also bad. And psychosocial hazards are really the same kind of discussion, but it depends. It's not like, it's not like chemistry where and I use that one often because chemistry is very objective. It has, a couple atoms and electrons and neutrons and all this stuff, and it affects human beings based on exposure pretty much the same way. It'll burn whoever gets closest to it. But a psychosocial hazard is just different. It's just based on how it affects the person, how the person sees it.
I almost heard on the tip of your tongue, it just depends.
It totally just depends.
And I think we were talking about this before we got on the air, that really psychosocial hazard depends on who's perceiving it, right? Can you explain that a little bit more for the audience?
Yeah, really, it is totally dependent on the perception of the person. Because we all, as much as we want to say that, you know, we're one species and, you know, we're all one and all that type of thing. Well, no, we're not. We're actually a little bit of both. We are one species, you know, but we just have different experiences, different wires running through our brain, different things that have happened to us in our lives. And when we start to recognize that, I heard somebody say once that different does not mean it's deficient, but that's what we say, because it's this way for me and it feels this way for me, and because you feel different, there's something wrong with you, wrong with your perception. There's not something wrong with it. It is simply different. But when I build a company, when I build an organization, when I build a thing, I build it to suit me, because that's the only experience I have. So all of my ideas are perfect to me and they work great for me. And I'm just honest about it. The way I do stuff is because it works for me, but that's where it stops. And that's something that, you know, I don't believe we have enough conversation about, is we are just have different ways of seeing things. And that difference is something that has to be factored in when we talk about how safe it feels to, that's something I talk about in the book as well. We can do safety stuff, but if people don't feel safe, what have we accomplished? And sometimes the reason I don't feel safe really has nothing to do with you. It's really me. It is the trauma that I had when I was 5 years old, or when the fact that my first job when I was 11 years old, I never got physically injured, but I got robbed. I had somebody walk up to me in a park and put their arm around my throat and take my money. And I was 11 years old. So then I just walked home and told my mom I got robbed. But there wasn't a big counseling thing. Probably should have. We just, where I lived in East St. Louis, Illinois at the time, it wasn't uncommon for people to get robbed. So it was, you just deal with it. But those different experiences plant these little seeds, and those seeds get watered by other stuff, get reinforced by other stuff. And eventually I come into the workplace with my own set of stuff that happened to me. It wasn't you, it was me. But when I tell you about it and you're aware of it and you do nothing about it, then it gets even worse.
You know, you just said something that sparked a memory that may explain why I reacted a certain way following a really bad, and I've talked about this, really bad, serious injury and fatality. So, you know, we grew up in an era where you just didn't talk about this kind of stuff. There was a stigma to it. So when I was 14 years old, I was a Boy Scout, and we were on a canoeing trip with another 11-year-old guy that was with us. And there was an incident as we were canoeing. We were by ourselves, and he fell out of the canoe and he couldn't swim. And I jumped in the water with him, tried to save him. We had a big underwater battle because I thought we were both going to drown, and he ended up dying. He drowned. And I remember him, the last thing I saw him was his hand above the water as he went under. And if it hadn't been for some people nearby, I'd have probably drowned too, because I was exhausted and very far from the bank. Well, after all that, my parents didn't really understand how to deal with that situation. So we just didn't talk about it.
Right.
Or we blamed the kid. He was a child, you know, but I was a child too. So we dealt with that way. We just didn't talk about it. You went to the funeral. My dad made me go down to the house where this kid died that day, still in my wet clothes, and tell them that, you know, he had passed away when they made the notification. And that was tough, right? So fast forward to now, I'm a safety professional and I deal with serious injuries and fatalities all the time, usually not associated directly with me, but in companies that we consult with. And usually it may be months after the fact. Dr. Martin will tell you, we get calls all the time and it's 3 months after the incident.
Right.
But the incident that I'm referring to, when I took my safety team up there, it was fresh. It just happened. We walked in the blood, right? And I didn't recognize in my team the impact it was having on them. And I think maybe a little bit less to me, but I'm used to choking that stuff down and dealing with it because that's the way we was taught as a child. That was reinforced during my experience in the military. And now I'm here, and I didn't recognize these signs of trauma and trouble that was brewing in my team. And so you brought that up, and this sort of Donald's question that's in the chat, how do we as safety practitioners, get beyond the suck it up attitude, so to speak? That's what the language Donald uses, to identify the warning signs and indicators of coworkers who are dealing with psychological or psychosocial issues. How do we identify that? Because I missed it, and I'm ashamed of it. I'll just tell you, I'm ashamed of it. This ruined somebody's life because I didn't have these skills.
Yeah, the first place you start is by looking in the mirror. There's this tendency on the part of safety people, and all of our, helping professions do the same thing, whether it be healthcare, the military, fire rescue, law enforcement. They all go, well, yeah, we're here to take care of other people, so let's get to the mission. That's the problem. It starts with looking in the mirror and dealing with what's going on with you. Because the only reason that what's happening with other people matters is because it affects me, because I care about that person. That's why it affects me, because I relate to that's why it affects me. It's not this, this nonsense about it's just altruism. We can go out and take care of the rest of the world, not take care of ourselves. It doesn't really work. Pushing this stuff down, it doesn't work. That's why I can't be good for other people, because I'm struggling myself. But it's a lot easier to skip over me and talk to everybody else, and, raise the kids and the family, and I'll deal with them. But who's never getting dealt with is me. And so that's where it starts. It's getting a relationship. First of all, it's meeting yourself. I didn't meet myself till I was 26 years old. I did. I lived most of the first 20. First of all, my brain wasn't fully formed. That's my excuse. But I was just doing what everybody else did. And I tried to break out every now and then, but I made a decision at 26 that I've never regretted. It had some consequences, but look, I have to live my life for myself. I can't keep doing this stuff just because it worked for everybody else. I got to do what works for me and what feels safe for me. And that's just been this constant, it's an everyday type of thing, because there's this tendency to focus so much on other people. But again, I don't believe that we can help others when we're struggling ourselves. We're struggling. And again, because we've been value cultured, trained, Pavlovian response driven, we've just been wired to just push it down, don't say anything. And some of it is the generations of folks that raised us. That's what my grandmother had to deal with, some horrific stuff. But she never, I didn't find out about something until she had died. She was in an abusive marriage. My grandfather hit her in the head with one of those irons. And matter if there was a dent on her for the rest of her life. And she didn't tell us until she was older that it was my grandfather who hit her in the head with an iron. And there's all kinds of other stuff. Then, they had to move from Florida to Washington to get away from him and his alcoholism and all that type of thing. So again, we've all got stuff. And if we don't take time to deal with that, of course, we aren't going to recognize it in other people, or we're going to recognize it so much in other people that that's going to be triggering in of itself. It all starts, safety begins with me. And then it's just like charity. And the good book says, charity begins at home and spreads abroad. It's got to start here, because I can't be good with other people if I'm not good with myself.
So there's a question here in the chat. Is safety and feeling safe the same thing? And I think you touched upon this a little bit earlier, right? And if correct me if I get this wrong, right? It should be, they should be together, right? But
Yes.
quite often they're two completely different things operating independently. Is my take on that correct?
That is exactly right, because safety is about the things that we do. Safe is about how we feel. There are communities across this country who have thousands of police officers and all this other stuff in the community, but it still doesn't feel safe to people. Right now, something I was thinking about recently, last time I looked it up, we have had no more airline crashes this year than we had last year, but it feels like it. It feels like it. Why? Because of what I've seen in the media and all that type of thing. So 80% of our decision making is emotional in nature. We do all these quantitative studies and research projects and all this stuff to convince people that something is. It doesn't matter. Dr. Myron Golden suggests that people do things for one reason and one reason only, because we feel like it. Feelings drive us. So safety is no different. Oh yeah, we got the program, we got the SMS, we got we got all the stuff, we had the class, but people don't feel it. So to them, it isn't. That's all. And again, that is not a criticism of the effort to do safety related things. It's just an observation that absent the feeling of safe, maybe we're not as good off as we thought. Yeah, our recordables went this direction, but people aren't feeling it. People got to feel it.
Right.
I've definitely been there. That we got a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to get some as we go through this and add to some of the questions that I have. But Donald had one here that just kind of follows up to some of the things we were talking about. He said, how do we as safety practitioners protect ourselves from these concerns? Let's be realistic. We have to be at our best when others could be having their worst day ever.
Maybe. Who said?
I agree. I agree with that. Maybe, right? I mean, it's hard to be at your best all the time. And most of the time we're not operating at our best, right?
That's why this book and my conversation about psychosocial hazards is not about now a lot of this emanates from being around other human beings, but some of this is designed this way. Who said that I have to be at my best all the time? Who came up with that idea?
Me.
Not all. Sometimes it was the people I got hired. Well, you got to be, we have this really high standard. Well, a lot of these quote unquote standards were created homogeneously. Me and my buddies, me and my senior team, we sat in the office and looked at each other. We thought this was a great idea, and we rolled it out and told people this is the way it's going to be. But that's the issue. The issue is it's not inclusive enough of all of us. So safety doesn't work really well when you do it to me. It doesn't work very well when you do it for me either. It works a lot better when you do it with me. And so who said that I have to be at my best all the time? I'm not going to be at my best all the time. I may be at my best a lot of the time, but again, it's just unrealistic. So again, we've created these entire systems and these stories about everybody's got to be at their best. It's got to be my best and their worst day. There are a lot of days I got on a fire truck and I was barely awake. I was barely awake. So I wasn't really at my best, but I had enough built into the system that there was 3 other people, and so it was the system that helped us rescue people, not us as individuals, because I'm a part of a system. But I argue that many of the issues are in the system. They weren't designed to give a crap about how people feel. They were designed to get the work done. They were designed to make money.
I love the analogy of the system, right? Because I would venture to say that a lot of times I'm at my best when I'm not at my best, right? Because of the people around me, the people I surround myself with, and because it makes me a little bit more raw to what other people are feeling in the workplace, right? So let me ask you this question, right? Because everybody's probably thinking, well, Dr. Daniels is pointing out, I get the psychosocial hazards, I get safety versus, physical safety versus inherent feeling safe. What do we do about it? And, in my mind, I think you cultivate empathy, right? Because if you're thinking about yourself, as you said, most people do, and how you feel about something, you tend to miss an opportunity to bring somebody into that system because you're not seeing it their way, right? If you empathize, you can see it their way, and maybe the system adapts. So that we all can have a semblance of that psychosocial safety. Does that?
Yeah, something I will say, the more birthdays I have, the less interested I am in binary solutions or binary choices. It's not this or that, it's this and that.
Yeah.
Because again, I have to both focus on me and focus on the people who are around me, because both have to be functioning for this thing to work. Because
Right.
if I'm all about me all the time, I'll miss out. If I'm all about them, then I suffer. We have to be able to hold two things at the very same time. Safety is complex. I know folks are looking for the shortcut and, give me the three things and give me the class that's going to solve it. I don't have one. I don't have one. Well, give me the checkbox thingy. That's the problem. We spend too much time checking boxes and not getting results.
Agreed.
I agree with
Again,
that.
this book is about, I want people to recognize that it's a thing at all. It's a thing. It's something at all. What you do about it, there's a lot of ways you can deal with it. But if you never recognize it, if you don't think it's a thing at all, you're not going to do anything about it. And again, not only will you not do anything, you will criticize, look down on, and mistreat other people who think it is. I've been called a crybaby, weak, all this kind of stuff. I was raised by a single mom, so I've never met my dad ever. So some of the messages that you get about what it takes to be a tough guy, I didn't really get all of them. I figured them out kind of along the way. But I remember being called, "You're too soft," and well, no, I just believe that I have greater access to the range of emotion that you may not have. But that's why you're an alcoholic and I'm not, because you don't have access to that kind of emotion. Or you drink it away, or you drug it away, or you depress it away. And again, that's not to say that I'm better or worse than anybody, but I look at it's been a strength for me to be raised by a woman and to be around women a lot. It's been a strength for me because I'm not intimidated, when there's a woman in charge. It doesn't bother me at all, because that was life for me. It's just another human being. That's all. And the question is whether or not what they are saying and doing feels safe to me.
Well, I can tell you, this is a huge issue. And it's a huge issue within the safety practice itself, because we've set this mentality up. And look, I'm not preaching, because I'm the worst offender in all of this, right? But I'm really trying to get better at being a leader in expressing empathy to others, because as a safety professional, we want to save the world. We take this on.
Right.
I get calls every week from safety professionals that say, "Look, man, I'm passionate about what I do. I care about these workers. My management team doesn't get it. They won't invest in safety. They won't do these things. I'm bringing it home at night. I'm worried about it. Someone is going to die." And we have this sheepdog mentality, and the workers are the sheep, and we have to take care of our flock. Right?
That's right.
We got to take care of it. So we may be importing a psychosocial hazard upon our own selves.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that was a good takeaway from the book. And there's a question here, a comment said, "I think what you're saying right now is why some of us walk away from the career for a while, only to return with a fresh mindset back to throwing ourselves into others' lives. And I think you can become too emotionally attached, particularly as a consultant."
Yes.
And I had to learn, look, man, extremely frustrating that people are not doing what I'm asking them to do. But that's all I got. I got my time, my advice, and then they have to make their choices as well.
Yeah, but guess what, James? That's about you. That's not really about them. If you think about it, so for me, therapy helped me to emotionally detach from the suggestion. It's not my problem unless I make it my problem. And this is something I had to, we talked with firefighters about. If we're running so fast, we slip and bump our head and don't get on the truck, or the truck gets in a wreck on the way, the house is still on fire. Yeah, matter of fact, you've now made things worse. I see the same thing again in these helping professions. Doctors, I got to do an 18-hour shift, but you're You're comatose almost. Now you're going to do surgery on other people. Again, charity begins at home. Safety begins with me. And even from a consultant, there are some people that they don't want to work with me. I know they don't, and I'm okay with that. I'm looking for the ones that do. Even in this book, this conversation about this, I'm not trying to convince people that this is a, if you don't believe it, don't. I don't have to deal with the consequences of you not believing. I don't. You do. And the question is, do you want to continue to do that? That's the same thing. I'll roll up to an organization. Oh, yeah, we got to do this cultural thing. And what I find is people will have me come do the class. Oh, yeah, we'll have you do the class. Then I have come you do the assessment. Oh, yeah, we've got problems. The issue is, do you want to do anything about it? Because doing something about it is about you. You got to look in the mirror, because a lot of the reasons this is the way it is, it's because of you, because of how you see it. And again, not a criticism of you, but an observation that's until that changes, nothing else is going to change.
Well, let's talk about that just for a second, because there's a question associated with that, and Dr. Martin and I have experienced this both, which is moving from acknowledging that there is an issue,
yes,
right, to actually conducting an assessment. So the question was centered around, are we missing something in our incident and accident investigations related to psychosocial hazards? And I'm saying, yes, it is, because Dr. Martin and I have both experienced that in fatality investigations. We've investigated together and done organizational culture and psychosocial assessment. So let's talk about the assessment process.
Yes. So think about the job hazard analysis process that you currently use. If you look down the list, you're probably going to find assessments of biological, chemical, ergonomic, safety, physical. You're going to have plenty of checklists with that. There's not even, now I have one, but the system was not set up to have you pay attention to psychosocial stuff. The OSH Act, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, was passed by the 91st Congress of the United States in 1970, has 19,600 or so words. It mentions psychological twice. It doesn't mention psychosocial at all. So our systems were not designed that way. They weren't. So that's why the recognition is important. If you're going to pay attention to something, you have to have a system that's going to help you do that. So in our incident investigations, we have to go past the physical cause of this thing. We go, oh yeah, and then here's what a lot of private sector folks do. Public sector folks do it as well. We do the investigation. As soon as we find a person, we blame them and we walk away from it. It's their fault. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was the system that we put that human being in that is at fault. It's that system. Because if you switch the people out and have the same circumstances, you got to get the same thing. And we say, James, he's a problem. He needs to be fired. Okay, great idea. And now we're going to have to spend the next 6 months or a year trying to replace James. You're probably going to get somebody who isn't near as good at it anyway. But okay, I guess that caused you to feel better because you still didn't fix the underlying problem. The fact that on their route, why did they have 30 stops on their route today? Why? Because why? That human isn't capable of doing that. That's why they were stressed out. That's why they ran to the back of the vehicle in front of them, because they were trying to get to that next location. You see what I mean? So it's a system approach, not blaming the human beings and saying there's something wrong with them. There was nothing wrong with them when you hired them 6 months ago. So how did they change in 6 months? They didn't. It was a system that was not properly designed. It's like when we think about ergonomics. Ergonomics is about creating the work around the person, not the person around the work. And the same thing applies here. We've got to create spaces that acknowledge that people have trauma, that acknowledge that people aren't going to be on their best day, that acknowledge because that's real. This other stuff is a bunch of industrial revolution nonsense that treats us all like we're machines, and we're not.
So let me go out on a limb here, because I like to do that. I like to walk way out on the limb and then see if you'll cut the branch off. Okay. So we're doing these investigations, right? We talk, James was asking about, like, is there a checklist? How do we include these things? So my thought is this: are psychosocial hazards at play? And the answer is always yes. Okay. Now, the answer is always yes to that. The question then becomes, what psychosocial hazards could possibly be at play in this system or with this person to help cause whatever happened, right? And was it contributing factor such that having the empathy or having the training or having some kind of proactive thing in place, it would have prevented or possibly helped prevent that, right?
Yes.
I don't think there's an issue of whether or not are they at play. They're at play
all the time.
We are all different people. I have my set, you have your set, James has his set, everybody in the workplace has his set, and that's why we're
bigger than y'all's.
That's why we're talking about a system here, right?
Yes.
Because systems are complex, right?
Yeah.
And having the knowledge that something can be a potential problem is, I don't want to say it's half the battle, but it's a lot of the battle, right? Is knowing that this is there. Now, the questions in the chat are like, well, what do we do about this? Well, awareness, right? Awareness. I touched on empathy, right? I mean, cultivating empathy. What are some other things that companies or executives or frontline work, anybody can do to help bring that system closer together as it pertains to psychosocial hazards of the people around them?
So the first thing is, the first
Are you
thing
cutting off
is,
the limb I was on there first?
Oh no, I'm out
Okay.
there with you. Because
right.
If you're about to say it just depends, I may lose my mind.
It does just depend. He's been trying not to say it, but we all know it's going to come out at some point.
So objectively, the first issue is recognizing that it's a thing at all. It's a thing at all. Now, it's a thing. Which one of the things is it? Because there is no such thing as a totally hazard-free environment. It doesn't exist. So let's stop this nonsense about we can get zero fail. It doesn't exist. There are hazards. And again, another reason why I wrote this the way that I did is there's a lot of talk about risk management and managing risk and all that type of thing. Risk is the product of exposure to a hazard that you're vulnerable to. And we stop at, oh, we got the risk, let's manage it. Why is it a risk in the first place? Why are we even dealing with that? So identify what it is, then the assessment of, okay, it exists. How is it affecting us? Because there are some of these psychosocial hazards, they're endemic to the job, period. We can't eliminate them. That's just not going to happen. So I couldn't say that I was going to be a firefighter and never go to buildings on fire. That's the job. You can't say, if you're in the military, you're good. You know that people are trying to kill you and you're trying to kill other people. It's the job. You're a surgeon. People are going to die in front of you. It's the job. But when it comes to physical hazards, that chemical, we have to have an SDS for it. We have to store it in the cabinet. But when it comes to psychosocial stuff, we go, we just kind of let them range. And this is where the organization, the system comes in. When we're doing the job hazard analysis, what hazards are we, the employers, going to expose these people to? And we know it. We know it. The general duty clause is about protecting people from recognizable hazards. And I'm trying to get people to recognize this as one. And then what are you exposing people to? You're the one who put them on the phone and said they're going to be a customer service representative. And then you didn't think to mention that people are going to curse at them every now and then. You're the one who put them behind the glass at a convenience store. You didn't think there were ever somebody going to come in and try to rob them. It's the recognizable stuff. Because like I said, you can't get all of it. I can't know that your significant other had a miscarriage last week. I can't know that. What I can have, though, is a system that when you are triggered, when you react, when you're feeling a certain way and you're not at your best, we recognize that and we tell you, here's how we respond. And to also tell you sometimes that we can't, there's only so much we can do. No environment is 100% safe for everybody. It just isn't. It can't be, because there's just different people. And that's not a failure. But why don't we spend time trying to recognize where our limitations are? We can do this, but from here, we're going to have to refer you to somebody. We'll walk with you, but we can't do the thing ourselves. Where I got a small business. There's 12 of you all. I can't, but I want you to know that I care enough to help when it comes up, to recognize when it comes up, and not to simply dismiss and go, that's just Martin again fussing. No, she's having a day. They're having a day. He's having a day that they're not at their best. That's it. And not turn it into some other thing. And then what happens is we label people. Oh, they're just this, and they're weak, and they're blah, 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 blah. And James, back to the point that you made earlier. Even if you were preaching, we're all sinners. We got to recognize we're all sinners. And the perfect dude, they crucified him. So that's just what it is. Let's just be more kind of objective about this and say we've all got our areas that we need to work on all the time. It's Arthur Ashe, I believe, said that success is not a destination, it is a journey. All this stuff is a journey. We're always heading there. You never really get there because when you think you've gotten there, there's going to be something waiting on you that you hadn't anticipated.
This is definitely a practice, and the time that we got left, I'd like to kind of address some of the questions that people have, because I think we've acknowledged, or at least created the case that psychosocial hazards are all around us, right? However, when people are exposed to psychosocial hazards, sometimes that can lead to mental health crises,
exactly right?
And
yes.
there are a lot of questions that center around a mental health crisis. So I'll just throw some to you from the chat. What patterns do you see before burnout, breakdowns, or serious mental harm?
So again, the same kinds of patterns that I would see before a person ends up with a respiratory ailment. It's consistent exposure to things that are unhealthy to them. They just happen to be psychological in nature. There's also situations where when we hired this person, the person had some sort of underlying respiratory ailment. That's why, for example, to wear a respirator, OSHA requires you to have a physical and a fit test. Is your body physically capable of wearing a respirator? And then does the respirator fit? It's looking at psychosocial hazards the same way, because the same way we end up with, one of the leading causes of death to firefighters is cancer. It's not all because of the exposure to carcinogens on the job. Sometimes there are underlying physical conditions that the person, because they're a human, brought to the job with them. The same applies. We should be looking at mental and physical health in very similar ways. What are some of the recognizable underlying conditions that are going to affect a person in this role? So if this person is claustrophobic, maybe we shouldn't put them in the confined space thing, because the job requires that. And maybe that's not something the person has fear of heights or whatever it is. It's what is the work that we expect people to do? What are the hazards associated with that? And how can we minimize their exposure such that it does not develop into poor mental health days or long-term mental illness? So it's just making the connections. That's all, as opposed to, it's that thing that we don't want to touch. It's going on anyway.
So let me just say this. We have a lot of safety professionals, risk managers that listen to the show, and they're probably all freaking out right now and going, oh my gosh, I have to. This is a team sport.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. This is not a safety professional thing. Do we talk about it a lot at our conferences? Are we hearing more about it from people like yourself, Dr. Daniels, and other people in the field? Yes, we're aware, right? Because our profession talks about it, but it's not just the safety professional's job to create a workplace that is conducive to helping people with psychosocial hazards that they bring with them or they're subjected to, right? So before everybody starts freaking out and say, oh my gosh, this is one more thing, it is a thing. Yes, they're real, right?
Right.
But this is a team sport.
It is.
This is a team sport. This is not a safety professional thing. This is an everyone thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So I thought Georgia Bryce Hutchinson, if I can give our friend there
Right.
a shout out, she spoke at a Veriforce conference. She's a frequent speaker at a lot of different conferences. She is a mental health professional.
She's a therapist.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she gave a speech that I attended, a presentation, and she just told us frankly, we're not trying to make y'all mental health professionals. That's what I do.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So as a safety professional, I can recognize when we have something that's struggling that may be outside the workplace to bring it into the workplace. And that's where EAP programs come in, having something set up within the system to get people help that need help before we end up in some sort of tragic situation.
Yes. Yes.
So for the person who asked as a coworker, how do I help without playing therapist? We don't want you to play therapist.
Yes. So
you could do more harm than good.
Think about it though. As a safety professional, I am not a chemist either. I am not an ergonomist. I am not a biology major. There's tons and tons of specific areas that I'm not necessarily good at. But that's what consultants are for. That's what teams are for. That's what you find it. And again, it depends. There are some things that you can do. Mental health first aid is a really nice awareness type thing. That doesn't make you a paramedic or a doctor because you do mental health first aid. It is, okay, take a deep breath, be calm, and what is the hazard? Identify it. How significant is it? Assess it, and then determine the mitigation steps. It's got to go in that, because if you get all flustered and you're gonna now your mental health is being affected by this. I got to fix it. You can't fix everything.
Amen. Amen.
Well,
Amen.
that's
Do
one
what
of
you
the
can.
problems I have. This is like a therapy session that we're having. I'm probably sharing too much personal stuff on here with people, like they think I need intervention because I'm an Alabama fan. They said, is being an Alabama fan a warning sign of psychological issues? But I do, in my personality, try to solve everybody else's problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you said, my wife said it to me 1,000,000 times, like, we have a family here you need to take care of. You're spending too much time trying to fix other people, and you're not focusing on yourself, the ones that you have a commitment to here. You need to spend more time doing that, because when you take on all of this stuff, it's really just stress. You're just adding more stress to you.
You're doing it to yourself
on things that you can't fix.
Exactly. I think Stephen Covey talks about the difference between our circle of influence and our circle of concern. I'm concerned about all kinds of stuff, but again, therapy has helped me to emotionally detach from stuff. I can't do anything about that. I mean, I could worry about it, but why bother? If I can't change it, and the only things that I found that I can change is my own behaviors. That's about it. And that's a struggle. That is. So be realistic. Work on me and be observant of what's going on around me. And, and don't, if it don't fit, don't force it. That organization who doesn't want you, why are you still working with them or working there if it's stressing you out that bad? Why? There's some clients that you don't need their money that bad. You don't.
That's right.
That's right. I've given a few of them their freedom over the years, but
amen. Right. It's okay to fire a client.
It is. It is.
So we've kind of run to the end of our hour, David, and we could talk forever. We could, I like to go out on the limb, see if you're going to cut me off and I'll fall to the ground, but didn't happen today. It just depends, right? Thank you so much for coming. And if James could hold up your book one more time, I'd really like him to do that. And thank you for everything that you do for our profession and for writing this book and getting the word out.
Yeah. And again, as I said when we started, I owe a debt of gratitude to both of you. You, Dr. Martin, for creating a safe space for me to do this research. And for not only making the space safe for me, but then encouraging me, even on the times I was questioning myself. Well, I'm not really sure. You can do this. You can do this. And we all need to hear that you can do this. And Mr. Chair, for the, I I haven't met a lot of people with your kind of background who thought the stuff I was doing all that important anyway, because they already done a bunch of stuff on their own, and they tend to think that's it. And so I honor and respect the leadership that you provide, in Veriforce system and across safety, to be honest about this, that you're working on it too. Because a lot of people look at the stuff you do and they go like, wow, he's got it all together. Well, we all both have it together and we're still working on it. So thank you for the example that you set for all of us. And it's been my pleasure to hang out with you.
Hey, the honor's all mine. It's all
Take
mine.
us out, James.
So thank you for everyone who attended today. There have been a lot of great questions that have come in. We tried to answer all of them. Dr. Daniels, before we leave, we've talked about your book. Tell them how to get your book.
Well, the easiest way to get it is to follow go to Amazon. I mean, that's the easiest way to get it. I'm going to have a few events here and there, but what I'm finding out is I don't really like selling stuff. So go out to Amazon. Yeah, they get a little bit of money off of it, but it's okay. It is what it is. If you have like a bookstore or a bigger business, another publisher, Ingram Spark, you can get, quantities of books from them, particularly if you're international. They seem to do a pretty decent job of that. And, if you run into some obstacles, let me know. I mean, but again, what I'm trying to avoid doing is handling more things that I have to handle. I do appreciate those who did the pre-order, because then they send them to me. I can sign them to send to people, but I didn't have to necessarily do the selling. So, but again, Amazon's a pretty easy way to get a copy, and they seem to be selling so far. People are buying them.
Absolutely. So thank you again. The title of the book is Psychosocial Hazards Are Real, a guide to understanding non-physical safety hazards. And thank you for all of you who attended today live, and to all of our listeners who are going to list this as recording on Veriforce's YouTube channel, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. A lot of people digest that in those different mediums. And I think this will be posted on LinkedIn within minutes of us concluding this session. So we want to thank all of our loyal listeners. If you're just joining us, we're approaching our 100th episode. So we have a bunch of episodes you can go back to. You can go back and look at Dr. Daniels about a year ago or so. Came on in one of our previous episodes, and check him out there, along with all the other amazing guests and conversation that we've had over the past couple of years. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for following us. If you want to, and you really want to support our work, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, tell your friends about us. I'm very, like to say this routinely, your mama wants you to listen to the risk matrix. Right? That's not a psychosocial hazard. That's something that you ought to feel safe about. So thank y'all again. Dr. Martin, take us out.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, baby. Till next time, y'all keep bringing those workers home safe. Out.
Veriforce is proud to announce the latest version of our Safeland USA accredited course called Basic Orientation 7.0. This is our flagship course that has been taken by over 1.6 million students nationwide. The newest version of this course is shorter than the last version, with condensed training and updated multimedia, but it still includes the same topics as previous courses. As always, the Safeland orientation remains with this employee through the career. It eliminates the redundancy of multiple orientations, and it stores all the training records in a single centralized database for everyone to use. Also, we offer two solutions for getting the training. You can either seek out Safeland training from one of our third-party providers, or you can send one of your instructors through our Train the Trainer program to teach your own employees. If you're interested in learning more, please contact our training sales department at 888-482-9101. That's 888-482-9101, or you can email us at trainingsales@veriforce.com.